Well, good afternoon. I would like to thank you on behalf of EY for taking time out of your afternoon to sit down and discuss with us something that we feel personally and professionally very, very passionate about. Today we're going to present to you a new, progressive, and predictive approach to cybersecurity that should alter the way that you think about cyber risk management going forward. And as mentioned before, I'm Brandon Arns. I lead EY's federal cyber practice. 10 plus years in the intelligence community, 13 plus years in DoD, 16 plus years designing, building, and implementing systems, both on the mission side and on the business side.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeff Johnson, and just from a quick background perspective, I spent the 80s with Navy Intel, the 90s supporting Air Force information warfare and getting that stood up in San Antonio, Texas. Then went into about 8 years of startups, venture capital funded startups, so a different type of world, but in the cyber environment and fraud control. Got a little bit frustrated with the results of what was happening in the community around 2007. So frustrated so that I went to Iraq for 2 years. So I ended up supporting the Task Force for Business Stability Operations, supporting DoD and State Department. Learned a lot of supporting those operations, and then came back and led military retired pay for 3 years. But due to some of the rising concerns that the industry was having about what was going on with the advanced persistent threat and different trends in the industry, I decided to come back into this particular line of business to test a new model, which we'll discuss with you today after a 2-year study.
Great. So during our presentation, we will baseline the cyber economic landscape. We'll define cyber economics for you all. We're also going to outline a case study where one of our clients was manipulated by a nation state so much to the point that they lost considerable amount of money from a book value standpoint. We'll talk about the investigative approach to that as well as the cyber aspect. We'll also present the predictive approach that I mentioned earlier about how can we get ahead of the adversary associated with cyber and the economic impact that the adversaries are having. We'll also highlight how we are working with our clients to really assist them in mitigating these threats and really confronting how to really deal with their business and the core aspects of what they find valuable inside their business, what they really need to be protecting. Then, time permitting, we'll take a couple of questions and get some answers back to you. So Ernst & Young, many of you know Ernst & Young. If not, we are a global firm in over 120 countries. We have nearly 200,000 employees, and we're in the business of public trust. We sign off on our clients' audits, we sign off on our clients' taxes, mergers and acquisitions. We're on one side of the table or the other. In addition to that, we also have a cyber practice where we support our clients with SOX, with intrusion analysis, vulnerability management, threat intelligence. And this conversation that we're going to have today is the blending of our financial heritage and cyber and how we can get ahead to deal with the threats. That work has led to cyber economics, and our cyber economics work has unveiled large-scale economic schemes that nation states are committing where cyber is used as a catalyst to accelerate a conversion. Over the past 2 years, we have been investigating conversion of intellectual property, financial theft, and manipulation, and industry manipulation, for economic gain. And economic gain meaning market entry and growth artificially. And so if you look at all of that and put an economic envelope around it of the business physics associated with what we're seeing and what we'll describe here, business physics is really around if I have a set number of products, yet in my field, the R&D spend that I put towards that set number of products or entering into that market is much lower than my competition, there seems to be something wrong from a financial standpoint. There are a multitude of business physics. We'll touch on a few of those today, but really understanding the economic impact of that victim and the adversaries and the competitive landscape that these folks fit in we can really start to understand what the true intent of the adversary is and what exactly is happening. So let's talk a little bit more about what is cyber economics.
Yep. It went too far.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, what you might recognize if you take a look at this pyramid is what's in the gray area on the bottom typically represents whether or not you're looking at the NIST standards or OSI standards or ISO standards or whatever standards it is that you want to attach to. The community as a whole started to evolve during the late 80s and the early 90s. Okay, so the information assurance, information security community, the information warfare community, a lot of different players were probing into the different risk areas, defining what risk is. The issues that came out of that is a lot of times you had IT professionals defining the IT profession around business risk. And so what happened here on this model, if you take a look at what's in gray, you have what represents a fairly reactive model, one that's built around defining policies, setting configurations properly, trying to keep up with the next vulnerability. And the other side of the pyramid, you have the monitoring side. Okay, so I'm trying to detect whether or not there is one of those vulnerabilities exposed, or if somebody's trying to exploit one of those vulnerabilities or has exploited it. And in the other side, on the application, that was really about roles-based security, segregation of duties. Okay, so we got focused on the technology. And we fell into this issue where we had what I refer to as the 10 by 10 issue. The IT organization typically gets 10% of the overall capital spend. The Information Security Office gets between 1 and 10% of that budget. Okay, so it's an artificial constraint that really has nothing to do with an ROI. It's take this and do with what you can with it. And if you stick to this standard over here, this maturity focus that the community has, then we're doing what we're supposed to do. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right things to protect your business. So what happens, and I mentioned the study early on, what happens if we turn this around a little bit? What happens if we look at the top of the company in? We look at what the company is supposed to do, what they're supposed to perform, what their objectives are, what their business and economic objectives are, and how they shape that economic success. They sell something, they build something, okay? They have to have a certain level of profitability, and as Brandon said, there's money going in, there's money going out, and business physics are pretty simple if you really understand how the line items work, okay? But if you also take a look at that from an adversarial perspective, look into the company, not from a technical side, and say, do they have this kind of server or this kind of server? What if I looked at it from an ROI? An adversary that's at a nation-state organized crime level, they have a return on investment expectation. And what if they're investing based on that return? So if their expectation is 10 billion, 20 billion, 50 billion, or 100 billion over some period of time, then $1 million investment is too light. They don't need to go in for $1 million. They don't need to go in and match yours. They can easily exceed it, but they get to focus it on the right things in the business. So what we started to do is focus on what we call the conversion layer. If you assume they're going to get in, because it's a little bit too difficult to constantly chase the vulnerabilities and the threats inside of the system, when you're not really sure what they're doing, why don't we focus on how they would convert that asset over to their benefit and what it would mean to your business, and then what would the new observables be? What would I look at inside of my company, and what would I look on out the outside to determine who the malefactor, who's reaping the benefit of this stolen R&D or cash? So it changed the way that we started to look at investigations as well as our recommendations. This was a case study of the very first company that we applied it. And here's how simple it worked. When we went in, this particular company had been hit. The FBI had already been in there for about 30 days. They'd already published a report. It was waiting for us. Okay? What we did is we split up our team. We said, okay, take the normal traditional approach. You guys follow the NIST model. You're all certified in forensics. You follow your normal path. We're not going to tell you what we're going to do. We want to see where you end. Okay? They ended after a few days right around the same place that the FBI ended. They had the servers. They could tell you what the technical TTPs were. And they could tell you likely what they were probably going after on those servers only, which would be credentials. Okay? In the meantime, what we did is we took a business team We took people that understood that industry. We took people that understood the financials in the industry, as well as fraud and cyber, into one room, and we developed a targeting plan. We said, let's assume that it really is nation state because the FBI's report says it was a nation state actor. What would a nation state actor be doing in here, and what likely nation state would be in this particular company, and why? If you look at it from an ROI perspective, it's not as difficult as you might think. There's only so many companies out there in the world that manufacture these certain goods. There's only certain countries that are interested in manufacturing certain goods or certain commodities, okay? So when you now develop the business plan, you assume that the other side wants to get into this business. What would they want? What are the barriers to legal entry? Their initial starting point would normally be legal entry. So what would be the obstacles to them entering the market and gaining a market leadership position or acquiring this company legally? And why would they want to invest in doing it this way? Okay, so there's got to be a bigger ROI. They must be trying to accelerate something. So we took the targeting plan and basically we ran the room with it. When we were done with it, we said, here's what we would do. And the first thing we did was when we went to the system administrator, we asked a completely different set of questions. We asked questions about who he was and what his psychological triggers were, why he clicked on a particular phishing email, and it led back to a very emotional response. He loved the Ohio State Buckeyes, and the people that sent the email knew it, okay, because it was an email about the Ohio State Buckeyes, and it was from an alert service that he subscribed to, and he only subscribes to 2, okay? So this is a lot of intel that goes into just knowing who this person is and what his triggers are, okay? That information wasn't even publicly available. The only way you would know that is if you were in his Facebook page. So they had done that homework, okay? So then we left from that, we went right around the room. We said the next part of our targeting plan would be we'd go after cells. But what we'd be doing is stealing some of your cells, undermining the cells, taking it over, okay, using bid rigging techniques. On the other hand, what we'd be doing is slowing down or creating losses that you should have won. So we went in and only talked about high probability wins, things that were in the 80% or above category, not the chaff that they could argue with, 80% or more, okay? That means they had already received a verbal approval. And it turned out that that's what the bad guys were, because now what we do is we take the signatures from those other 3 servers that were associated with the cleanup, okay? And we went into those systems, and sure enough, they had been manipulating outgoing emails, incoming emails, to slow things down and delay and to even lose. And then what they were doing is looking at the Salesforce.com kind of system, the CRM system, to understand what their bids were going to be and what their strategy was going to be. It was having an overall 2 to 3% impact over a 9-month period. 2 to 3%, okay? That's at the level where you don't panic about it as a CEO. You normally blame it on sales. Everybody likes to blame sales, okay? And the sales guys, they normally rationalize. Just, I'll fire somebody for you, okay? And that's typically the way the process goes, okay? Then we went around, same thing was going on in the supply chain. We told them based on our review, based on what we would target, their green product line was the special product. It was at 15% at the net line in profit. That's why they were going to go IPO. It was the whole thing, the whole reason, okay? So same thing, same signatures were there, okay? And what they had done is they'd gone to this just-in-time supply system, and they were creating issues with the outbound orders, so they were constantly under-ordering, okay? So their error rate was still under 5% as a total, which was their threshold to panic. But now all of a sudden that extra 2%, they normally had a 2% error rate, that extra 2% was all on the negative side. Error rates normally go back and forth, under orders, over orders, okay? So we found the same technical signatures there. And then we moved around, went to R&D. We said, we don't think they would go after your old patents or their old products, okay? We think they would be going after just the green products. That's what they were doing. We said, we also think they're probably going to want to fund this. So they're probably taking money from you to fund it, because that's what we would do. And sure enough, same signatures. So overall, you have a very well thought through business campaign, economic campaign. And it's not just one company, it's an industry. It's an industry, different players, different things. So they had devalued this company over that 6 to 9 month period by 30%. And then we asked them, our final question was, has anybody approached you over the same period of time for a duress sell? Somebody that's trying to get you, instead of paying $5 billion for you, maybe $2 billion. Yes. Yeah, there is. Well, who might that be? They tell us who. When did you first establish a partnership with them? It was a partner, okay? 6 to 9 months before, okay? How would they know that you were under this kind of duress, right? So after this is how it went over and over. We've done this 20 different times or more, and we've also had 40 different countries that we've looked at, and this is the same pattern, which is now going to lead to this next slide.
And one important point here, just to piggyback, this is a $3 billion firm. So you would think that there is plenty of money invested in IT, in terms of security, in terms of business processes. It's not. Is the C-suite talking amongst themselves? They are not. So again, this is unifying business as a whole with cybersecurity to address the issue at hand.
Now, when you look at this next chart, this is what we call our double S curve. It got to a point in time after about 9 months of doing this, we were getting pretty depressed. Okay, so you're sitting there and you see this over and over and over again, and you're like, how can this be? How can this be? And you start running the numbers on market caps and what's happening in different industries. You see this is going on in railway, this is going on in industry, this is going on in pharma, and you just give up. So we took all the indicators of what we were seeing, we laid them on a table, old-fashioned way, and we started putting them in a linear order to see if there was any linear order to it. Thank goodness there is, okay? So like us, in our information warfare area, there's a playbook. We all have playbooks, right? We all have standards, we all have guidelines. They have a workforce. Everybody has a workforce. I don't care if you're organized crime or nation state, you have a workforce. Somebody's doing the work for you. And they're following a game plan, okay? And they have rules that they can play, or they can break, rules they can't break. And they normally have methodologies they're gonna follow, and it all makes sense because that's what we see when we do our investigations. So it turned out that in terms of being able to track it, you can tie some of it to regular business and market growth types of numbers. So that's what we're doing as we go up. Okay, they're gaining more and more market share. What is behind there, though, under each one of those stages is a list of 100 or more indicators, things that we observe. Okay, you don't have to have all 100. They're things that you have in common throughout each industry. So now that lets us go in and talk to a company, and we can help them understand where their industry fits. But under each one of those yellow boxes, each player in the industry has a different role, a different victim role. So some of the victims are there for everything, like I just explained, they've taken everything. Some just money. There's no other role. They don't want to wipe out competition, they want it to have kind of a faux capitalism approach. I need it to look like capitalism, but I need to control it, okay? So there's a role for everybody, and that's how that's now worked. So now, as Brandon said off at the very beginning, it allows us to kind of understand where they're going, what to expect, and actually we can get more aggressive from a business planning perspective now, because this is really competition. This is the new norm, okay? We tell our clients, don't panic about this. Let's not cry about it. Let's not go pulling our hair out. This is the new norm. This is how it's working. This is the emerging markets. It's the high-risk emerging markets. Let's sit down and retool. Just like the military retools, let's retool.
So analyzing this risk, Jeff mentioned it, a bunch of indicators behind all of this. It really focuses in on the economic, geopolitical, and cyber components. And so internal to EY and the cyber economic capability, we're using those fundamentals, the three I mentioned, to really define and identify entities. And entities are markets, companies, geographies, even people. And assigning those a risk score based upon the indicators that we have tracking from a financial standpoint, geopolitical, and and a cyber component. And so that information, that entity information, that entity risk scoring, is helping our clients make more informed decisions. So let's talk about that for a minute. A great example is the supply chain. Hence being here at Defense One, let's talk a little bit about the DIB and the defense industrial base. If I take a major weapon system and I look at the entire supply chain through the DIB, second, third, fourth, fifth tier providers, how many of those are subject to the case study that we just described? How many produce critical widgets that fit inside a weapon supply system that need to be reviewed, need to be addressed? Do you understand who's in the supply chain, and are there threat actors trying to manipulate themselves into supply chains to either insert counterfeit parts, gather intelligence upon what defense is doing, or even just trying to get access to raw materials, to intellectual property, to anything else to help further their cause, whether it's economic gain or whether it's military intelligence. There's quite a bit there associated with how the adversary is manipulating different companies, whether it's through duress, whether it's through just watching and gathering intelligence, or whether it's entering into new markets and becoming competitive. In addition, looking at the merger and acquisition realm, is there a company that you're looking to acquire? Is it in a market where you're being enticed by millions, maybe billions of dollars to go into? There's a need for your product and you're being enticed to go there. Well, what are you really going to gain out of that? Are you going to gain the millions and billions, or are you being enticed for a short period of time to give up your intellectual property, to give up your engineers, to give up that information, and 2 years down the road, you're no longer there. You have been pushed out. So there's a lot behind the S-curve that Jeff just presented around the different phases, the psyops, the enticement, the use of cyber to manipulate these different companies and to manipulate different economies. So we work with our clients to help them understand this from a business risk scenario standpoint. And Jeff mentioned it earlier. What are we really protecting? What are companies really protecting? The CIOs, the CISOs understand computer network defense and putting up perimeters, putting up security to protect the networks. You go ask the rest of the C-suite, what's important to you? It's not necessarily what's being protected. There are other functions, there is other information that may not be as protected that really is the crown jewels. That information is the crown jewels from a business standpoint that if somebody were to get their hands on it, they could easily convert it. Yet that's not being protected. So when we work with our clients, leveraging this library of business risk scenarios that overlays the playbook that Jeff mentioned earlier from an adversary standpoint, let's address what you would do if you were under attacks like the case study or like other instances where we've seen where our clients have been impacted by these large-scale economic schemes. So this approach is helping C-suite, it's helping senior government leadership make better informed decisions to unite different aspects of the business or the government. Whereas before, each pocket operated and made decisions independently, we're now starting to see unity around cyber and business or cyber and government. There we go.
Okay, now a little bit of the more positive news. Okay, we were speaking earlier. If you take each of the slides that you just went through, where we talked about what the issues were, a focus on conversion, and then a more proactive approach, really understanding what the playbooks are. Remember, there's only so many ways that you can actually manipulate a business. And so those business risk scenarios you hear about, some people have challenged, is it 20, is it 21, is it 23? We're comfortable right now with our 21, and we'll add more as they become a more validated model. But for the most part, there's only so many ways to do it. There's only so many ways to commit financial fraud in accounts payable, for example. Okay, you either have to alter a payment, alter the database. Okay, there's only so many ways to get that payment out, but you got to get a payment out. Okay, so you don't have this big universe that seems really scary when you break it down to the business risk scenarios. What you do have, though, is an adversary that leverages multiple business risk scenarios in a campaign, in an economic campaign. Okay, so when you understand that and you change the way that you do business, for the most part in our business today, we've started getting away from doing well thought out competitive business planning. The big boys, the people that own the markets, they typically only look at their direct peers, and they only look at them for a split second in time because they already have their plan and they're going forward. The guys that are the small ones, they're looking for a niche. I need my niche, but they study their market to understand that niche, and then they go forward. So the best competitive intel is normally the smaller companies, okay? So what we're doing right now is when we look at the solution model, we say, look, change the model, change the way you do business. Accept the fact that they're going to breach you. Accept the fact they're going to take data, but don't accept the fact that they have to take all the right data, okay? So this is a military audience. So some of them are familiar with what happened during World War II with the D-Day invasion. The entire preparation for D-Day was in the open, right? It was in the open. They had an entire campaign just based on deception. So the enemy's getting all this data. They don't know if we're attacking in Greece, if they're attacking in Italy, if we're going to be in Normandy, what side of Normandy, right? And even when the attack took place, there was a feint. They thought, well, this is probably just a fake and they're going to go over here, okay? So it's a matter of how you accept your new environment. This is a new norm. It may be frustrating to most. It's frustrating to me when I see certain companies going out of business and bankruptcy because of it. But it's time to change the way we do business and leverage our strengths again. We are really good at innovation. We are really good at agility, speed. Okay, so you have to look at the other side. There's a malefactor. There's another company getting the data, getting that R&D and converting it. Okay, now if they're handed their R&D every year, does that make them highly competitive? No, because they think you're just going to give it to them next year. So they're not creating new inventive technologies and driving that. And their bureaucracies inside their companies, are they going to get more efficient? Are they going to have higher levels of quality? No, because they're not driven by that competitive spirit. They might buy or steal robots to get higher quality, right, in the future, so you got to look for it. So what you do is you take a model like this and you say, let's get back to basics. IT and IT security need to be part of the business, but they need to change the way they do things too. Bring the threat intel in, but it's competitive threat intel and cyber and economic intel all together, so it makes more sense. So when you see these campaigns that people think, oh, well, these kind of actors, they only take money. These actors, they take R&D. These actors, well, they just take privacy information. When you lay that down on a campaign map, there's actually a lot more collaboration going on than you might think. We didn't see that until we started laying all this data together in those campaign models. So you got to learn what kind of data that you need to make decisions faster and make more correct decisions, okay? If you're used to investing in a portfolio in your company, just like the military invest in a portfolio of new jets, which one is going to be the winner? They pick the best one at the end. But you want to make more correct decisions, and you want to make them faster, and then you want to be able to put a program in place where you're monitoring them coming in, and then you have these little synthetic environments up, and they're taking things, but they're taking the wrong things. But it has to look real. You have to make sure that you increase your competitive edge, which means you want them taking certain things that look like R&D. You want them investing in it, okay? You want them going down this path when you're really going down this path. You want them to think that you're going to launch next year when you're really launching next month, okay? It is getting back to basics and becoming more competitive and acknowledging they're going to do certain things, but they can't stop you from being fast. They can't stop you from being innovative. They can't stop you from being better in quality. Okay, so there's just certain things they won't be able to do. And if you can just delay them 6 months, a year, 2 years, that's where your win's going to come from.
So obviously you can tell that we feel extremely passionate about this and wanting to get ahead and make an impact before it's too late. I think this group, all of us here collectively, are to the point where we can take action to really prevent the erosion of our economy here and abroad. For so long, and rightfully so, the focus has been on ones and zeros from a cyber attack analysis standpoint. We need to take a step beyond that and start to apply business and economic lenses to really understand what the adversary is after and try and really get ahead of preventing this erosion. We need to be able to confront adversaries around this as well, and it's the dependency on the confronting portion shouldn't be just the government. And I don't mean individual companies taking their own action. What I mean is being prepared and understanding what is going on so that you have better processes in place, you have better security steps in place, and you have more holistic cybersecurity and more holistic security around your business so that you can thwart different aspects of these different types of campaigns. Billions are spent yearly on computer network defense to get one step ahead, to get one step ahead, to get one step ahead. We feel that cyber economics is a macro level leapfrog opportunity where we can get ahead and stay ahead to prevent any more impact to not just our economy but national security interests as well. I think together, collectively, we can mitigate these threats and have that positive impact going forward. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming to this session. Really appreciate your time. We've got a few minutes, probably about 10 minutes or so. We can take a couple of questions if there are any from the audience. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just that second bullet where it talks about confronting adversaries. What does that mean, or how do you do that?
Again, confronting adversaries in the sense of cyber economics is, you could also say confront your competitor. You know, if you think of everybody out there as a competitor, and some competitors have nation-state support or organized crime support, then you're going to confront them. You're going to now, when you go to the market, you're going to be monitoring them as well. You're going to monitor their executives. You're going to monitor their R&D. You're going to monitor their marketing plans, their financials. A lot of it's out there, and you're going to confront where there's inconsistencies. When they're not investing in R&D in this one particular energy company, yet they have the same exact number of transformers as this other energy company, you want to confront that. You want to put that down. You want people to be aware of it and have it be transparent. Confronting them is also making sure that you are putting in the right steps and measures to prevent them from taking yours and exploiting it, okay? So there's a number of things that when you think about it from a business perspective, instead of just cyber, cyber is an important piece, okay? But there's a lot of things you can do on a business side. We advise one client, okay, you're gonna go in, you have to be able to do this, but what we advise you to do is put an escrow account in place, because you're not gonna win in their court system. Put an escrow account in place with automatic triggers, and when you see these particular observables, it triggers the release of those funds. So that's a confrontation, okay? But if they want you in and they're saying that they're not gonna ever do those things, why would they be afraid to sign an escrow letter, okay? So those are the types of things that you wanna be able to put into your plans. You know, somebody asked us earlier what we thought about what happened with the indictments for some individuals from a nation state. And we said, you know, sometimes we may be confronting the wrong person. The confrontation may be the companies, the specific companies that received the R&D that you can prove converted the R&D into competitive products, because that's an antitrust violation, okay? That's a law on the books, it's an international law. So there's certain things that you can do to confront these kind of adversaries if we don't focus as much on the cyber foot soldier and more on who's receiving the benefit of the theft.
Yes, sir.
From your perspective, does it make much difference whether excuse me, Kerry Gordon from National Defense University. From your perspective, does it make much difference whether the adversary is a state actor or non-state actor in terms of the defensive measures you might take or your client might take?
Not really. That's where I think it actually gets easier, because whether or not it's a nation-state actor or a private actor, if you think of them as a competitor, there's already laws on the books that address those types of issues. So you're not going to take a president or a premier or prime minister to court. You're going to take a state-owned industry to court like we do today. Okay, and if it's not a state-owned industry, if it's private, but it really is a state-owned industry, but it appears to be private, the same thing. So these kind of strategies, I think, help everybody. And it eventually, funny as it may sound, it eventually helps them. Because the only way those other countries are going to be able to survive long-term is not to create a whole big house of cards that is going to fall down, and it will fall down. That's the way it works, okay? They're only going to improve long-term if they figure out how to do this, which is why a lot of those countries are putting reforms in to address the same kind of issues that we're talking about here today.
Any other questions? Any final comments?
No, appreciate your attendance. If you have any questions, we're here to help.
Yeah, thank you very much.